Hello and welcome to our webinar, Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia. I'm Mike Bias. I'm coming to you from Central Illinois. And before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to give you an introduction to your screen. Obviously, on the left hand of your screen, you'll see the PowerPoint presentation, and here you can see the webcams. Directly underneath, at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see something called the Q&A pod. Now, I'd like you to go ahead and to make sure that you understand and that it's working, go ahead and type your zip code into the Q&A pod. Now, nobody is going to be able to see anything that you type into the Q&A pod except us. Other participants can't see your name or your comments or your questions, but we like to see where people are coming from. And so typing your zip code into the Q&A pod is helpful for us. Okay, I can see that people are understanding how to do that. That's great. And we have people today registered from Massachusetts all the way to California. And I see a bunch of people here from Illinois, and I see some Kentucky people. Great. Okay, well, our speaker today is Mariah Perry. She began volunteering as a community educator for the Alzheimer's Association in 2017 after the death of her mother due to dementia. The association was such a wealth of knowledge and help for her family. She strives to give back however she can and hopefully help other families as well. She's involved with Walk to End Alzheimer's, education programs like this one today, and also advocacy where she interfaces with elected officials to have an impact on public policy and awareness of Alzheimer's and other dementias. So I'd like you to welcome Mariah Perry,
Hey,
and she will turn
thanks,
on her
Mike.
webcam. Hello, Mariah. And I will go ahead and turn my.
All right, as Mike said, I'm a volunteer educator here in Kentucky. I'm coming to you from the Lexington office. We are a part of the chapter of the Greater Kentucky Southern Indiana chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. A lot of information to cover today. This is a broad view of understanding Alzheimer's and dementia. Excuse me. This is on for those interested in learning more about the disease. You may have a recent diagnosis for you or a family member, or you're just interested in what's going on in the world. You're probably seeing a lot more about Alzheimer's and dementia in the news, in our social media posts, regular TV shows. The two things I use to escape now both have a Alzheimer's storyline. It's kind of interesting. It's like there is no escape anymore, but that's true for the caregivers and those affected. We're glad to have you today. By the end of today's program, you should be able to do the things shown here. Compare Alzheimer's and dementia. Recognize how Alzheimer's disease affects the brain. List the risk factors of Alzheimer's disease. Identify the 3 stages of the disease. We're going to talk about current FDA-approved treatments that can address some of the symptoms. We'll also share how scientists are working to advance research and introduce you to some resources available through the Alzheimer's Association. As I said, it's a global crisis, and you're likely hearing more and more about it, if not in your personal life, hopefully in the media, and we're getting the word out more than we have before. Let's start with a couple of questions. How many Americans do you think are living with this disease today? 850,000? 5.7 million? 12 million? Or 3.4 million? The correct answer is 5.7 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's. That's projected to reach 14 million by the year 2050. That's just 30 years from now. Currently, an estimated 50 million people are living with dementia worldwide. How about another question? How many unpaid caregivers do you think there are in the United States? 1.2 million, 8.5, 13 million, 16.1 million. There are 16 million Americans providing unpaid care for people with Alzheimer's or other dementia. More than 80% of care provided at home is delivered by family members, friends, or other unpaid caregivers. Over half of caregivers report having to go in late, take time off from work, or quit altogether due to caregiving demands. These caregivers are providing approximately 18.4 billion hours of care for last year alone, valued at more than $232 billion. Excuse me. This disease has a personal impact on the individuals facing it as well as a financial one. If we don't have caregivers giving that voluntarily, we've got to pay for that care somehow. All right, a few more stats about the impact of Alzheimer's. You might be surprised to know that Alzheimer's is the sixth leading cause of death in the United States. It is the only one in the top 10 that currently has no treatment or cure. I think that 65-second stat is also noteworthy. Every 65 seconds, someone else develops the disease. If you need more about those facts, you can always go to alz.org/facts. You may hear the terms Alzheimer's and dementia used interchangeably. As a kid, I thought dementia was just part of being an older person. And then the word Alzheimer's always got my attention a little bit more. And I think that's still what we're dealing with, is some of the confusion. We're going to discuss both Alzheimer's and dementia and how they are related. Before, though, let's test your knowledge a little bit more. Alzheimer's is a normal part of the aging process. True or false? That is false. Alzheimer's is a brain disease that causes problems with memory, thinking, and behavior. It is not a normal part of aging. It's more than memory loss. It's a progressive and fatal disease that kills nerve cells and tissues in the brain, affecting an individual's ability to think, plan, and ultimately to function. Alzheimer's is currently always fatal. Let's try another one. People younger than age 65 can get Alzheimer's. I wish that were false, but it is true. Approximately 200,000 Americans under age 65 are living with younger onset Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's can develop for people in their 40s or 50s. Younger onset is also known sometimes as early onset. Let's watch a video from Dr. Heather Snyder explaining how Alzheimer's and dementia are related.
Is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
As we saw, there are many causes of dementia other than Alzheimer's. However, between 60 and 80% of all dementia cases are Alzheimer's. Each type of dementia has different causes and symptoms. Those listed are just a few classifications. I hope that helps clear up the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia, and how dementia is that umbrella term for all kinds of dementias. Our next video, we have a care partner for someone living with Lewy body dementia, one of the kinds of dementias.
Certainly, having the diagnosis of Lewy body was helpful in our planning because we began to understand where this was coming from in the brain, where otherwise we would not have known. Like we knew something was happening, but what was it? To give it a label actually helped, although it was a big umbrella. It explains some of the characteristics and symptoms that we were experiencing and seeing.
Gail explained the importance of knowing her husband's diagnosis. Now, with all kinds of dementia, it's a very individual disease. Even knowing the kind doesn't mean it's going to be exactly like someone else with the same kind. The path through dementia is a very individual one. Now, there isn't a treatment that can slow or stop Alzheimer's at this point. There is a great value in seeking an accurate diagnosis so you have somewhat of an understanding of what may come next for you or your loved one. Let's take a look at Alzheimer's in the brain. The brain is our most complex organ in our body. It's also our most powerful, despite weighing only about 3 pounds. Let's hear an expert explain our brain.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alice Alzheimer's described specific changes in the brain, what we call the formation of plaques and tangles. Now, Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and is thought to impact memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has 3 main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. The cerebrum fills up most of your skull. It is part of the brain most involved in remembering, problem solving, thinking, and even feelings. There are about 100 billion nerve cells or neurons throughout the brain that transmit messages in order for us to create memories, feelings, and thoughts. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to the brain tissue loss, or what we call shrinkage, and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, such as memory loss, problems with thinking, planning, behavioral issues, and even at the end stages, problems with swallowing.
Everyone with a brain is at risk of developing Alzheimer's. There are a few other known factors that increase a person's risk for developing the disease. Let's see if you know those. What is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's disease? Genetics, family history, or age? Age. Although Alzheimer's is not a part of normal aging, age is the greatest risk factor. After age 65, the risk of Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years. 32% of people age 85 or older have Alzheimer's. In addition, here's Dr. Snyder sharing a little more information.
Alzheimer's disease is marked by specific brain changes that result in the clinical changes in individual experiences. That is, changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. And ultimately, Alzheimer's is fatal. The exact cause for these changes is unknown, but there are some hints as to what may contribute to an individual's risk. age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. And when we look at populations of people, we see an increased risk over the age of 65. However, Alzheimer's is not normal aging. Family history is also a known risk factor. Research has shown that those who have a parent or a sibling with Alzheimer's are more likely to develop the disease, and that risk increases if more than one family member has Alzheimer's. When we talk about the genes involved in Alzheimer's, there are two categories that could potentially be involved: risk genes and deterministic genes. Risk genes increases an individual's risk for developing the disease, but does not guarantee that they will develop Alzheimer's. Deterministic genes, which are rare for Alzheimer's, guarantee that the person will develop the disease.
In addition to the main risk factors for the general population, Hispanics, African Americans, and women are at a higher risk for Alzheimer's. Research shows that older Hispanics are about 1.5 times as likely as older whites to develop Alzheimer's and other dementias, while older African Americans are about twice as likely to develop the disease as whites. The reason for these differences is not well understood. Researchers believe that higher rates of vascular disease in these groups may also put them at greater risk for developing Alzheimer's. Women are more likely than men to develop the disease. An estimated 3.4 million American women are living with the disease today. We know that women live longer than men, making them more likely to develop Alzheimer's. However, longevity and lower death rates can only partially explain this difference. Researchers are exploring how genetic differences between men and women may impact disease risk. To summarize, age is the greatest known risk factor. Family history is a risk factor. Having a parent or a sibling with a disease increases an individual's risk. Risk genes and deterministic genes are the two types of genes associated with Alzheimer's. Hispanics, African Americans, and women are at an increased risk for Alzheimer's. No two individuals experience the symptoms and progression of Alzheimer's or any other of the dementias in the same way. Let's hear from one of our experts, Dr. James Hendricks, on why this is the case, as well as from some individuals describing what it's like to live in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease.
Is all the other things that can happen to us as we age, and we know that Alzheimer's, the most common risk factor for getting Alzheimer's disease is age, but we also have lots of other things that go wrong with us as we age, and so how those other health factors impact our brain can also impact how Alzheimer's presents in other people.
It's a different kind of forgetting. It really, really is. It's not just forgetting where I put my car keys. It's much deeper than that. And for example, I cannot read a book. I used to be a voracious reader because by the time I turn a page, I have forgotten what I had read. And if you're reading a novel, you have to know what transpired before in order for you to continue to read on. And so I can't read a novel, so I've even stopped trying.
Math, I can't do a simple tip anymore. You know, I sit there, I stare at it. It's crazy what numbers I can't deal with anymore. And in some ways, that's the disease to me. The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which I've dealt with words my entire life, you know, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
I'm like an overachiever, and when you're unable to deliver or you're not performing at the same pace that you once did before, that's frustrating. It's frustrating to not know where you place things. It's frustrating to not be able to explain to someone the problems that you're having. You can't articulate it in a way. It's frustrating to read something and you forgot what you read. It's frustrating to continuously have to change your password and you just changed it last week and you're constantly doing the same thing over and over again.
I think the thing that surprises me the most about my dementia is that it is progressive, and I'm finding that I'm forgetting more. And they do memory tests for me all the time at the doctor's, and so that becomes a little disconcerting at times to see my cognitive impairment continue to decline. But again, I really have hope. I don't live really in the future. I can't live in the future. I can't worry about what the future is going to bring. I have to live for today.
Again, these individuals we just heard from are living in the early stages of the diseases. I was privileged enough to listen to Julie B. share her story in Washington, D.C. last year. These are real people living with the disease. Symptoms worsen over time for everyone. However, people progress through the stages at different rates as their abilities change. If a person has other health issues, those can affect that as well. On average, a person with Alzheimer's disease lives 4 to 8 years after diagnosis, but some can live as long as 20 years, depending on other factors. Let's hear Dr. Snyder explain the 3 general stages of Alzheimer's disease.
Alzheimer's affects everyone differently. As a result, it's difficult to place a person in a specific stage of the disease. However, there are 3 general stages that are commonly referred to as early, middle, and late stage Alzheimer's. In a medical context, you may hear these stages referred to as mild, moderate, and severe. In the early stage of Alzheimer's, an individual may be able to function independently. However, they may start noticing more frequent memory lapses. Friends and family may also begin to notice difficulties in the person, and a healthcare provider may be able to detect problems in memory or concentration by conducting a detailed medical interview. Middle stage Alzheimer's is typically the longest stage and can last for many years. Damage to the brain cells can make it difficult to express thoughts and perform routine tasks, and this can lead to increased feelings of frustration and anger. In the final stage of the disease, an individual loses the ability to hold a conversation, control their movements, or respond to the environment around them. Cognitive skills, that is, their memory, thinking, and reasoning skills, continue to decline, and this can lead to personality changes and need for round-the-clock care.
No 2 individuals experience the symptoms and progression of Alzheimer's the same way. Progression through the early, middle, and late stages, or the mild, moderate, and severe stages, varies from one person to the next. Sometimes you can move back and forth a bit. When we caught up with my mother's disease, she was in the middle stages, early middle stages. And some days she would seem to do a little bit better, so it seemed like early stage. And then we moved along to the late stage. While symptoms worsen over time, people progress through the different stages, but it's always a progression. Another knowledge question for you. True or false? There are several drugs available to slow down the progression of Alzheimer's disease. That is false. There currently is no treatment to prevent or slow Alzheimer's disease. However, several drugs are available to address some symptoms. Let's hear from Dr. Hendricks about those medications.
Currently several drugs that are FDA approved to treat the cognitive symptoms associated with Alzheimer's disease. They treat the symptoms, but they don't treat the underlying cause. So eventually people will progress, but they do treat some of the symptoms and help people for a time. So the first class of drugs are cholinesterase inhibitors. These drugs work to prevent the breakdown of acetylcholine, which is a chemical messenger found in the brain that's associated with learning and memory. There are 3 FDA-approved drugs that are in this class of drugs. There's Aricept, there's Exelon, and there's Razodine. There's another class of drugs that modulates glutamate, which is another chemical messenger in the brain that's associated with learning and memory. And this drug is called Namenda. And then there's a final class, which is actually a combination of cholinesterase inhibitors and glutamate modulator, and this is called Namzaric.
As Dr. Hendricks said, these treatments can help relieve symptoms in people for a time. Because everyone experiences Alzheimer's differently, the treatments work in varying degrees and are not effective for everyone. An accurate diagnosis is important to ensure that the proper treatment is prescribed. Drug misuse may lead to negative side effects. Other physical ailments and conditions can also play into which medications might be a choice or others that you should avoid. Again, the treatments only address some symptoms of Alzheimer's in some people. They do not treat the underlying cause of the disease. In the last decade, researchers have made enormous strides in understanding how Alzheimer's disease affects the brain. Many recent insights point toward promising new strategies for the treatment, prevention, and diagnosis. I hope you've heard in the news some of the latest gains and sometimes losses in our research. There's a lot of hope, though, still where we're headed with Alzheimer's. Let's listen to some more experts.
Alzheimer's and dementia research, the advancements that we've made in the last decade to understand the disease as a continuum, meaning that the biological changes are starting a decade or more before someone is experiencing the changes in the memory and thinking. This sets the stage for possible prevention. The idea that when we have the tools to identify those individuals at the earliest time point, and when we have the interventions to target individuals at that earliest time point, we can intervene to stop or slow the progression of the disease before an individual loses their memories.
I'm excited about what we're learning these days regarding lifestyle. One of those things that we've seen in the past, of things like exercise and nutrition, have now started to gain more momentum to indicate to us that it can change your ability to slow cognitive decline. That is really the first stages of Alzheimer's disease. This may include things like social engagement, mental cognitive training. It can be things such as exercise. It can be nutrition. All those things are now starting to point that they will lower your risk for Alzheimer's disease.
A lot of hope does come from the Alzheimer's Association, all the research that is being done. Even though there is not a cure today for the disease, I know in my heart there is going to be a cure one day. And I know we're getting closer for that cure. Because even if you fail in a research study, you learn from that failure in the research study. That failure always brings progression.
It's nice to see the association spearheading in many ways the emphasis on getting the money at the federal level and at the private sector to get the research done so that someday there will be an effective treatment, hopefully cure, hopefully prevention.
There is a lot of hope for where we're headed with research. One of the key ways to keep research moving is through clinical studies. Scientists are looking for new ways to treat Alzheimer's, and there are many drugs currently in the pipeline. Finding those trial participants is now the greatest obstacle, other than funding, to developing those treatments we so badly need. Let's hear from Drs. Spargo and Hendricks about the importance of these clinical studies for the future of Alzheimer's treatments.
Than ever for people to participate in clinical studies. The fact is, right now, we don't have an effective treatment to stop Alzheimer's disease. And if we don't have people participating in clinical trials, we never will. And so participating in a clinical study is one way that everyone can get involved in a very direct way in the fight against Alzheimer's disease. And for people who currently have dementia or Alzheimer's disease, there are some additional benefits. You get access to very close medical care. You also may be among the first people to have access to the treatments that will eventually prove to work.
Sometimes you hear the phrase, it's a failed trial. That means that it didn't hit the endpoint, it didn't achieve an FDA-approved drug. But I would say as a scientist, the only failed trial is one that doesn't give you valuable information. And if the trial is well designed, if it is a good scientific experiment, you get extremely valuable data so that you can plan the next trial and do the next study even better than the last one. And it gets you that much closer to that FDA-approved drug, to that effective treatment, and maybe someday even a cure.
Currently, more than 5 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's. By participating in clinical research, you can move us toward methods of treatment and prevention for all those affected by this devastating disease. Alzheimer's Association Trial Match is a free clinical studies matching service for those with dementia, caregivers, and healthy volunteers. To start, simply create a confidential user profile and receive a list of studies that may be a match for you. Don't just hope for a cure, help us find one.
As we heard from those experts, everyone can help to advance Alzheimer's research. The association looks for people of diverse backgrounds to participate in clinical research. Because they're at an increased risk of developing the disease, it's important that researchers are able to study large populations of those individuals better to understand the disease and their vulnerability. But anyone can participate in Trial Match. Healthy individuals, caregivers, those with dementia. Not every research involves drug studies. You can take place with online, again, starting at Trial Match, and you can go to alz.org/trialmatch. Matches you to studies available in your area or to your abilities, your age, your healthiness. It's a great service, and again, as those researchers said, helps us in so many ways. Even with a failed drug study, we gain valuable information for our future. The Alzheimer's Association is in communities across the country, providing direct service to individuals and families facing the disease. Our mission is to eliminate Alzheimer's disease through the advancement of research, to provide an enhanced care and support for all affected, and to reduce the risk of dementia through the promotion of brain health. Our vision is a world without Alzheimer's disease. The association is available whenever and wherever you need reliable information and support. 3 of our key resources that connect you to the information and support include the phone line, the online services, and in communities nationwide. Let's learn more about those.
I've had a couple of phone calls that I've been able to make in to the call center when I've had a couple of quick questions that I wanted to ask. You know, there's been a couple of nights, 2 o'clock in the morning, You have questions, you have anxieties, and I was struggling dealing with them, and it's amazing. It was one of the best things I ever did was keeping the call center on my favorites now. Just to know that there's somebody you can call who is aware of what you're going through.
When I went to the Alzheimer's Association website, which is alz.org, there I was trying to find out more about what was Alzheimer's, what really is this disease, what is younger onset Alzheimer's, what is dementia, is there a cure, how long has this been around, how many people are affected by this, where can I go for resources, where can I go for help, what do I do with this? How can I handle this? Is there more people like me out there? Is there someone that I can talk to if I need to? And there I found the support line that's 24 hours a day. And there I found where I can go for workshops, where I can go and read things and postings that people have done, where I can find out what events is happening in the Alzheimer's Association, where I can see how it's affecting people around the globe.
Since I've been diagnosed with dementia, the one place that I know I can go to for assistance and help and support is to the Alzheimer's Association. There are people there that I know by name that I can contact if I'm having a difficult time or if I'm struggling to find some resource, that they will provide that to me.
Again, those resources are invaluable. The 24-hour helpline shown there on the screen, 800-272-3900, is available anytime, day or night, for information and support. You can be connected to a master's level clinician available around the clock to provide in-depth care consultations. Free of charge, navigation care service offered to families at any stage of the disease. Help is available in more than 200 languages. On the website, alz.org, it's often a great place to start after a recent diagnosis of Alzheimer's or other dementia. There are sections specifically for people living with the disease. There are sections for caregivers. Lots of information. It's kind of like the grocery store. You don't want one of everything every time you go to the store. So slow down and take what you need and know that that information is there always. The Community Resource Finder is a wealth of resources based on communities. This is great if you have a loved one in another part of the country and you're trying to find resources to help them or their caregivers. It's not just in your backyard, it's all over. Does anyone have any questions?
All right. Well, thank you, Mariah. Your webcam has frozen, but we can hear you just fine. Some kind of technological challenges here.
Always.
Yes, yes. It's never a dull moment. Well, we do have a question. How should I go about getting my loved one to the doctor? My loved one doesn't think anything's wrong with her, but we notice signs, and she keeps making excuses.
Sometimes it helps to be a little bit sneaky. If you can get your loved one to the doctor for another reason, you can often give a doctor a heads up with your suspicions without violating HIPAA. I know that's a biggie, but you can let the doctor know beforehand, or like we did with my mother when we took her to a neurologist. I just slipped the receptionist a list of things that we were seeing. That way the doctor was aware of them without putting my mother on the spot, and then he could bring up those concerns as well. You can call the 800 number for more suggestions. Start with your regular family doctor. If you don't get the answers you're looking for, keep asking. Ask for a consultation with a neurologist.
Great. Yeah, and I think that's really important with respect to the HIPAA Act. HIPAA just says that the doctor can't talk to anybody about your medical condition, but the doctor can listen. So if for instance, your loved one is being, kind of difficult and saying, I'm not letting you go into the doctor with me, and you're saying, well, how is the doctor going to know what we're seeing with mom or with dad unless we tell them? Before the appointment, what you can do is you can just send a letter to that doctor. Um, Making a phone call might not be so lucky because they're so busy, but the HIPAA says that they cannot talk to others about that person's medical condition without their consent. It does not prohibit them from listening. So if you can tell the doctor through a brief letter some of your very specific concerns, if you say, hey, we're concerned about mom's memory, that really is so vague it doesn't tell the doctor anything, because there's going to be a lot of issues that cause what look to be memory loss, but it's really not. It's not Alzheimer's. It could be depression. It could be stress. Who knows what it is? So if you say mom's having trouble with her memory, that's not very helpful. But in a letter to the doctor, if you say, hey, last Tuesday mom asked what was for lunch 5 times and we had already eaten lunch. Mom keeps asking to go home and she is home. Mom keeps asking about her cousin who died 20 years ago. So if you can be very specific, that's very helpful. And that way the doctor would know what to look for. Okay. Mariah, the next question, I'm having trouble with role reversal. My mom always took care of me. How can I be the bad guy and get her to stop driving?
We had that very same issue, and a lot of doctors are willing to be that bad guy. You could say, it's not our decision. Dr. So-and-so says you can no longer drive. It's no longer safe. I know of families that have taken the sneakier route and just taken the battery out of the car, uh, hiding the keys. It depends on your loved one and how you can manage that situation. It is hard. It's hard to give up that independence. It's hard to admit you can no longer drive. But if you can get a third party to take the heat and be the bad guy, sometimes that helps.
Gotcha. There's another question here, and if you'd like, I can take this question. When are the drugs like Aricept and Namenda no longer effective?
Yeah, go for it, Mike.
Okay. Well, I'm not a physician, so that's very important to understand. But we've interviewed numerous neurologists about drugs on these webinars and also on our programs by phone. And the problem with drugs is you can't really tell too much if they're effective, because it's not like you take the pill and suddenly your memory gets better and your word finding gets better. Rather, the overwhelming majority of the cases when you're taking these medications, it's just that it gets worse more slowly, if that makes sense. So it's hard to tell, well, is it effective or not? And it's kind of like one of those things where you say, well, if you think it's bad now, if you weren't taking this medication, it would be much worse. So it's not something that you can easily identify and say, oh, okay, I see a benefit. Rather, you don't see more of a worsening. So when are the drugs no longer effective? That's a question that should only be answered by your doctor. And hopefully that's a specialist. It's a neurologist or somebody who really knows Alzheimer's, as opposed to a general practitioner. A general practitioner can treat Alzheimer's or other dementias. They can prescribe medications, but they're not as expert in this area. So what I would strongly urge you to do is do not discontinue the medication because you think it's not helping without first talking to your doctor. Some people discontinue the medication after a period of time thinking that, oh, well, I can just start up on it again and I'll pick up right where I left off. Wrong. The evidence is pretty clear that you need to take it regularly without interruption to get the maximum benefit. So when are the drugs no longer effective? That's a decision for you and your doctor to make together. We have another question. When should we look for a facility for mom? What's the main reason people place their loved ones? Does everyone move into a facility? So when we talk about a facility, we're talking about, memory care unit. So Mariah, what do you think of that?
No, not everyone moves to a facility. That's a very personal decision, a family choice. Some families are lucky enough to have the ability to care for their loved one at home the entire time. Others simply need a break, need for their loved one, they may need more care. They may have more health issues as well and may need a memory care facility. Now, a memory care facility is one designed for those with dementia and Alzheimer's and addresses those concerns on a different level than a personal care facility or an assisted living facility, although those are often very useful in all of these cases. It depends on what's available in your area. But no, not everyone has to go. It depends on the care that they can receive at home. If you have many loved ones that can step in and help care, there are very many successful families that have kept their loved ones at home. So it's again a personal decision.
Yes. And the other thing is a couple things on that, if I can add. Um, I would really be careful with the language that you use because people feel guilty all the time. They say, we had to put mom into a home or we had to put dad into a memory care facility. And, that's rather harsh language and it usually is going along with a lot of guilt. You put the dog out, you put the trash out. You didn't put mom into a home. Alzheimer's did that. You moved her there and moved her there to get better care than you could possibly give her on your own. So just be very careful with the language that you use because although everyone doesn't have to make that move, the majority of people, unless they have a lot of resources in the family with a lot of different people to share caregiving responsibilities, it is a 24-hour-a-day job, and one person can only do so many hours before they burn out. So just be very careful with the language that you use because if that is the decision to provide the best care for your loved one, there shouldn't be any guilt or stigma involved with it. Very important. Well, that is about all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank you all for logging in. I hope you'll go to alzwebinars.org and sign up for a future webinar and also share this with family members and friends. And when you go to alzwebinars.org, you can watch recordings of previous webinars on various topics about the disease and about caregiving in general. So Mariah Perry, thank you so much for sharing your time and your insight with us.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much for logging in, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.